But as we said, the workshop tonight is around supporting our young people with challenging behaviour. My name's Dr. Kelsey Odgers, and I'm a clinical psychologist from the Psychology in Schools team, which is part of the Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust, which is the local mental health trust in Norfolk and Suffolk. And I'll just hand over to my colleague to introduce herself.
And my name's Catherine Thrasher, and I'm the assistant psychologist with the Children's ADHD team in NSFT as well.
Thanks, Katie. And just to say, Katie and I will be talking you through the workshop tonight. So I'll be talking through the main half, the first half, and Katie will be talking us through the second half, but we may be chipping in here and there. Great, so we'll get started now. So just to say really a little bit about the aims of the session today, just to kind of give you a bit of a flavour of what we're going to be talking about as we go through the workshop really. But I guess this kind of first thing I always say when we do a workshop like this is that this is a huge topic. We could spend, hours and hours talking about this, lots of things we could cover. So really today is an introduction, just to kind of spark some initial ideas, highlight things that you may want to start thinking about if you haven't already, and just giving you some sort of initial ideas and resources, and you can kind of then go away and have a think about them in relation to your young person. So I guess that's the sort of main thing to highlight as we sort of make a start today. But we're going to really focus firstly in that kind of first half is why behaviour that challenges. So we're really going to be thinking about behaviour and thinking about kind of what underlies the behaviour, what is the behaviour trying to communicate, and sort of thinking much more about that curious stance, which can often be really hard to take when we're sort of, trying to manage these behaviours. And then for the second half of the session, we're going to be thinking much more about tools and specific strategies that you might be able to start thinking about using if you haven't already. So there's something called an ABC chart that will talk you through. It can be a really useful way of sort of starting to unpick some of the behaviours that your young person might be showing. And we're going to link that really to what's happening in your young person's brain and really thinking about their development and their kind of skills development too. So there's going to be a real focus on that in the second half. And then finally, we're going to come to thinking about resources and signposting, because as we said, this is an introduction and we'll give you some things if you want to think about this more and hopefully sort of point you in the right direction. So what I'd say is, you're going to get a copy of the slides and the recording shortly after the session today. So just really sort of sit back, relax, and just sort of take notes, any things that you really want to pay attention to, and just, and come back to really. So let's make a start. So this first Slido here is asking, what behaviours do you see in your child that concern you? So what are the behaviours perhaps that have brought you here tonight? And as we said, this is all anonymous. It'd just be great to hear from as many of you as possible about the sorts of things that you're sort of, coming with really. So aggression, anger, hitting siblings, so kind of what you're seeing, what you're noticing, again, other people saying
frustration,
anger.
verbal aggression,
hyperactivity, impulsivity, crying
having
before
difficulty going to school.
Swearing, as well as sort of the hitting out, other people saying very similar things. And you can see there the sort of themes that are starting to come up across the top. Sort of talking back, stealing,
I saw defiance in there as well, some destruction.
Lots of overlap between what people are sort of saying here as well. Again, other people sort of saying aggression, that kind of physical violence, can be verbal, lots of people talking about verbal. Again, other people mentioning siblings. Sort of tantrums, difficulty sort of managing emotions, other people talking about refusing to go to school. Absolutely. Okay, so lots of big things that you're all sort of really managing at the moment. Really, really difficult. And just to say, although that you can see those ones sort of disappearing as you're talking, we're going to go back to them, and we certainly use the things you write in Slido to really inform the workshops that we do. So thank you all so much. And again, just seeing all the overlap really between what you're all talking about here. Okay. So thinking about some of those behaviours, how do they make you feel? As parents and carers, what do they make you feel? Upset, helpless, like you've failed. Again, other people saying worried and upset. Again, very similar themes here, sort of worthless, guilty. Other people talking about feeling like a failure or inadequacy as a parent or carer. Powerless, yeah, feeling powerless to change it perhaps in those moments when it's coming up. Being quite frustrated. Yes, it can make us feel really low and stressed and alone. It can be very isolating. Yeah, again, just looking at all of those themes coming across, so many of you are saying kind of very similar things. Embarrassed, yeah, depending on where that behaviour shows up in front of other people. Feeling drained as well. Powerful word, isn't it? These are all really powerful words, actually. Yeah, sort of feeling useless. Again, that kind of linking to that. Other people talking about being a failure and sort of scared sometimes. We can be scared for different reasons. We can be scared of our young people or scared for the future. Yeah, sort of feeling like you can't do anything right and just feeling really stressed, and other people talking about feeling judged here. Again, and that linking to what other people have said around embarrassment. These sort of really big feelings that can come up for us as parents and carers when we're managing these things. We really want to connect to that today because it is, you know, it's such a sort of emotive thing when our young people display these behaviours. Okay, so thinking now about your child. We've really thought about how you as parents and carers are feeling. How do you think how do they make your child feel? Anxious. It can cause them to hate themselves. It can really sort of internalize some of this stuff, can't they? And cause sort of low self-esteem, yeah, scared and confused, embarrass themselves as well, and feeling quite different to other people, make them feel out of control, can lead to sort of breakdowns in our young people. Yeah, again, low self-esteem, embarrassment, anger, confusion. And I guess what I'm sort of noticing is sort of the parallels between what you as parents and carers feel and what you're sort of wondering about how your child feels. They perhaps are feeling that frustration, confusion, embarrassment, isolation, all of those things that you know so openly wrote in the last one. Yeah, can cause such big feelings for both us as parents and carers and our young people. Yeah. Again, other people saying very similar things, feeling very lonely, make them quite vulnerable in certain situations, other people are saying. Okay. And how do these behaviours affect family and or school life? Again, thinking about the impact that they can have on different areas. So in what ways do they affect? Among people feeling drained? Perfect in school, horrible at home. So yeah, someone else saying something similar. So different presentations at home and at school, and we often do hear that with these things. Yeah, so it can, yeah, different
A lot of
responses.
stress that we're seeing a lot.
Yes. Yeah, I wonder sort of what activities it impacts. Does it impact getting to school or doing certain things as a family? Again, sort of tension at home, it can impact relationships with siblings, relationships with peers as well, kind of restrict family life. And that can be so hard when, you know, relationships are so important, and it can make things that should be nice really hard for us. Those things sort of going out and being together as a family, you know, sometimes can't happen, or they make those things really difficult. Yeah. Okay, so sort of having a real impact on family relationships more broadly as well. Just put a lot of pressure on different relationships within the family. Yeah, so thank you all so much. Again, as we said, we will go through these all in great detail. Thank you all so much for sharing these things. It just makes things so difficult. These behaviours, you know, can really have an impact. Okay. So we'll come back to some Slidos in a minute, but we really wanted to just think about defining what we mean by challenging behaviour, because of course that's kind of what we're sort of starting to think a bit about, and we've heard from you all the kind of examples of it, and also the impact already, you know, just how powerful actually it's been, just as someone sort of just reading through what you've already shared with us. You know, these behaviours can have such a profound impact across the board, really. So in terms of what we mean by this, so behaviour can be described as challenging when it's of such an intensity, frequency and duration as to threaten the quality of life and or the physical safety of the individual or others, and it's likely to lead to responses that are restrictive or result in exclusion. Just to sort of break that down a little bit, I guess, you know, as we've seen, there's some examples already that you've shared on the Slido around what some of these behaviours can be. And I guess the key things here is something about the intensity and actually how frequently they're happening. So often these challenging behaviours show up, you know, at least on a weekly basis, often daily, which again makes them so difficult for us as parents and carers and for our young people in sort of managing them, really. And again, just thinking about the quality of life element, as we've sort of touched on, these challenging behaviours can affect the quality of life of our young people and also their families and sort of wider network as well. So their parents and carers, as we've heard from you today, but siblings and peer relationships too, which again we'll sort of come to. So I guess, again, this just really illustrates this is a very difficult situation to be in. And I guess just want to acknowledge again that it's great that you sort of taken the time out just to sort of go through the workshop today and hopefully to give some ideas of ways to manage. Okay, so we've got some more Slidos just to hear again from you, which of the behaviours, and this is a multiple choice now, occur for your young person. So just select as many as apply to you and your young person. There are lots of people already selecting, and I'm guessing for a lot of you, you're selecting more than one here. And this really links, doesn't it, to that earlier slide of things that you've already shared that your young person is displaying. So refusal behaviours, and I guess I'm wondering if that links to what people were saying about school. Often, you know, there's behaviours around refusing school, which can feel really tricky. That can then have an impact on other things for our young people. Shouting and screaming, as people were talking about, and that can include sort of swearing and maybe certain other things that are hurtful towards us or to siblings or peers. Aggression towards others, and again, that can look quite different for different people. Sort of causing self-injury or unintentional injuries to self, and running away as well. So, you know, all of these we can see have been selected multiple times. But again, it's just sort of showing that, you know, there's many of you on the call today sort of managing these different things. Okay. So thank you all again so much for sharing those things. It definitely helps us and hopefully helps you to sort of know that you're not alone with these things. So we're going to move on now to thinking about this iceberg analogy. And some of you may have heard of this before. It's something that's maybe been talked about in different forums. But I guess what we're thinking about here is, does behaviour have a purpose? And I guess what we're really asking you to do is sort of use this iceberg metaphor to think about the behaviour. So what is the need that's driving your child's behaviour? So I guess we use this analogy to think about what you might see, so what you might see above the water, and that might be the behaviours that you're talking about here. So what is it that you're seeing in your young person? Maybe it's those things you indicated on that Slido, but then what we're going to sort of do is look below the surface. So like an iceberg, we tend to pay attention to what we see above the surface, but actually what we need to do is think about this bigger picture that's beneath the surface. What's underlying about this? And this is really relevant when we are thinking about behaviour of all children, but I guess particularly those children that maybe struggle to communicate for different reasons, and even younger children as well, who again might not be able to put in words what they're trying to communicate. So as I said, often all of us sort of respond to the behaviour that we see. We all do this, you know, especially when those emotions are high for us and things feel difficult. You know, we sort of respond to what we're seeing in the moment and go sort of straight to a consequence or straight to talking about that behaviour. But I guess this analogy really reminds us of the importance of trying to step back and consider what might be underlying that behaviour for our young person. So what might be below the surface for them that we're not seeing, that young people can't always make sense of. So are young people perhaps feeling scared or sad or angry about something? Are they feeling overwhelmed? Have they got sort of sensory needs and they're feeling overstimulated? And maybe that's what's leading to this behaviour that we're seeing. Have they got another unmet need? They're finding it difficult to communicate, or they're not feeling safe in a given situation for different reasons. Because we know that children's emotions are often sort of driven by their need to be protected, to be free from pain, and be comfortable and safe. So some children are displaying this behaviour because of an emotional need, and they may find it really difficult to express their emotions in an appropriate way. But we know, as we've said, other sort of express challenging behaviours due to an underlying learning difficulty or a neurodevelopmental need, such as autism and ADHD. So it's just being curious about your young person, about what sort of underlying, or what are they trying to communicate through that behaviour. So we just need to take more of that curious stance and not get so entangled in that behaviour, because sometimes we can and all of us do this, we can end up labelling young people that display these behaviours as naughty, aggressive or violent. So what we're trying to do here is just start to separate the young person from the behaviours they're seeing, and sort of see the behaviour in a different way, and see it as something that the young person is trying to communicate, an unmet need that they're trying to communicate. But I guess with all that said, we know that this is so challenging for parents and carers. And of course, it's easy to say this, right? And when you're in the moment, it can be so confusing and overwhelming and so frustrating, all those emotions that you've already touched on. But I guess what we're just trying to do is just sort of step back, slow this down, and just thinking about, what might it be for your young person? And doing this in a moment when you feel regulated yourself, when you feel in a position to be able to just take more of that curious stance and start to think about this for your young person, which you may have already started to do. So really, when we think about the purposes of behaviour, sort of what's sort of underlying that surface, as we've touched on, we want to sort of think about these different areas, because what we know is that these are often the things that are underlying the behaviours that you see on the screen. So we can think about this in different ways. So perhaps the behaviour enables the child to access something that they want or need. So we know that all of us need physical closeness to other people. As humans, we're programmed for that closeness. And perhaps through the behaviours that your young person is showing, they are getting that physical closeness from a safe adult. They might show these different behaviours to get that one-to-one time with a parent or someone in school, for example. It doesn't matter, I suppose, in terms of attention, even if it's negative, we know is a form of attention and a form of kind of that one-to-one space. So, just think about your young person and what they might be sort of getting from that behaviour. And we also know that sometimes behaviours enable the child to avoid or escape something that they're struggling with or dislike. So, for example, just be curious if there are patterns to when this behaviour shows up. And the ABC chart that we'll show you in a second will really help you to think about this. But an example might be if a child is really struggling with a particular lesson in school, so maybe they really struggle with English, does the behaviour always show up on a day when they have English? And actually, does that mean that they don't have to go into school that day, or they don't have to go to that lesson? So actually they escape something that feels really difficult for them. Is your child using the behaviour to sort of communicate that they are struggling internally? Something that they're struggling to articulate with words? Are they in some kind of pain? Are they hungry, perhaps? So again, just thinking about the times that this is showing up and what else that they might be trying to communicate. And finally, as we've already touched on, does your child maybe have additional sensory or physiological needs? And actually, does the behaviour show up in situations when actually there's sort of a sensory overload for them? There's too much going on. And that's why you're seeing that behaviour. So again, it's just thinking about what's underlying the surface for your young person. So we're going to think about this now with some Slidos, sort of getting you to start thinking about this. Hopefully it's a nice sort of safe space to start to do this for you. So the first Slido, and if you think about those recent examples for your young person when these behaviours have shown up, can you give an example of something your child might be avoiding with their difficult behaviour? So homework, yeah, making decisions, yeah. So if they find making decisions really hard, again, that behaviour can help them to avoid that. Going to bed, be about, what is it about bedtime that's hard? So chores, other people are saying. Yeah, some other people talking about sort of avoiding thinking about things that are really painful in family life at the moment. Going out of the house, again, other people talking about chores and going to bed too. Certain aspects of their routine they might be trying to avoid. Social situations where they struggle with anxiety. Yeah, so are they is the behaviour always showing up when they have to sort of go to a crowded place or when they have to socialise with their peers? And is that something that they find really hard? That behaviour really helps them in those moments to sort of escape those things that are painful and difficult. Yeah, so other people talking about friendships, and they're sort of, when demands are put on them around chores and other things, they find that really hard. Getting ready for school. So again, if school is a difficult place, people are talking about anxiety around school. Actually, does the behaviour mean they don't have to go into school? Is it that refusal behaviour that you've touched on before? Again, thank you all so much. And again, just the overlap here is huge. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So other people talking about crowded areas. Is it sort of that sense over kind of stimulated, that sensory overload? Changes in routine as well. Okay. And again, very much along the same lines, can you give an example of something your child may want or need when they have the difficult behaviour? What might they be needing or wanting? So space, socialisation, or quiet time. Yeah, what children need might be very different. So yeah, food or a hug, one-to-one attention, an aspect of control, especially if there's other areas of their life that feels out of control. Yeah, lots of people talking about space, but other people wanting time and attention from a loved one, from you. Again, hug. Yeah, that physical kind of touch that we all need. Reassurance, space. Again, acceptance, someone to listen. Yeah. So is it that when that behaviour shows up and when things have calmed down, they then kind of get that one-to-one space, they get that time alone? And I guess it's really useful to think about this in your own family. If there is a busy household that you have with maybe more than one child, is there a child looking for that space, that one-to-one time? Yeah, so just sort of lots of people saying similar things. Okay. So what might your child be struggling with internally when they behave difficulty? So are there feelings that they're experiencing that might be driving the behaviour or triggers for that behaviour? So frustration. And again, the things that make us feel frustrated vary. Are they struggling to do something that they'd like to be able to do but can't? Anxiety and feeling that they can't do it, feeling out of control. Again, those big emotions, worry, anger, sensory difficulties. And isn't it interesting about that kind of feeling out of control, that anxiety? And then often in that sort of previous slide, you were talking about them looking for some control. And often we do seek control when we're feeling out of control. And these big emotions that you're all describing here can really leave us feeling out of control. Yeah, sort of jealousy as well. It can be a big thing. Confidence. Yeah, unable to sort of manage big emotions. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And what is the outcome of these difficult behaviours for your young person? So what does your child get in response to those difficult behaviours? So do they get one-to-one time? Do they get that attention that they might be looking for, whether it's positive or negative? Might they get to avoid things, and what things might they get to avoid? Again, they're getting lots of people talking about attention, and I want you to be as honest and open here as you can. You know, what if we think about it in that sort of different way, what do they get out of these behaviours? Yeah, so sort of getting that time with you. So people talking about they might then end up in their young person's bedroom. People talking about giving that sort of more negative attention, but that young person's still getting that. They get time alone, which again might be something that they're seeking in the first place that leads to that behaviour. Yeah.
They get time off from school as well. They're sort of avoiding that thing they might find more difficult.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Do they get out of other things as well aside from school? Do they get out of chores? Yeah, getting out of the situation. They get time with mummy or daddy. They don't perhaps get asked to do things. Perhaps they're treated differently to siblings because of those challenging behaviours. Absolutely. Yeah, might lead to arguments. That then might lead to some nice making up as well. Thank you all so much. You know, it's really key to sort of be, you know, honest and open as you are, which is so important. And we're going to be talking a bit more about kind of the consequences of behaviour and sort of these things to start to look out for, you know, the things that might sort of be maintaining some of these behaviours. Because we know, I guess what we often know is that all of us sort of react quite quickly to these behaviours. You know, we're quick to sort of maybe think about a consequence or talk about it straight away. And we're going to talk a bit about the brain in a moment, and our young people's brain, and actually why it's so important to actually leave a bit of a gap and actually think more about what we call connection before correction. So before we sort of go to correct that behaviour and sort of give these consequences and talk about what they've done wrong, it's actually just doing that connection first, because we know that our young people will be in a much better place to sort of hear us in those moments. So we're really going to be thinking about some of these sort of outcomes of the behaviour and the impact they can have, and therefore what we might be able to do a bit differently that might be more helpful. So thank you all so much again for joining us there on Slido. So I've got one more slide before I hand over to Katie. And I guess it's just really wrapping up and almost summarising all of the things that we've talked about so far. So as we've said, we've thought much more about sort of what underlies the behaviour. Of course, we've thought about the tip of the iceberg and the things that we're seeing, the things that you and your young people might be struggling with. But then we've really sort of thought about that curious stance, some of those things that might be sort of driving that behaviour, such as things that your young person is sort of avoiding or getting as a consequence of those behaviours. And we've also thought a bit about this already, but I guess what we know is that for most young people who experience these challenging behaviours, there's going to be such a significant impact on all of these different areas of their lives, and especially, you know, and for families as well, as you've already kind of highlighted. So we know it can impact things at home. You know, you talked about chores, you talked about bedtime, about perhaps eating as well, and dinner time. It can make those things really tough. It can make school really hard. You know, as we said, getting into school might be a challenge for your young person. It might impact their lessons as well. But also, I suppose, relationships, and that feels like a big one that we've spent time thinking about with you tonight already, that we know it can have such a profound impact on the young person's relationship with their parents and carers, with their siblings, but also their peers at school. And of course, the family relationships as well. So some of you talked about the strain it can put on marriages and relationships that you might have. But I guess we also know that it can really impact a young person's sense of self and their sense of esteem, because they can really get sort of caught up in the negative energy that, you know, that others can have around them. So, you know, it can have a huge impact, as we've said, on what you can do as a family or their ability to sort of make friendships at school. So that can end up being quite internalized by the young person, and they can start to feel quite negatively about themselves. So I guess what we just want to say here is, you know, this is why you're here tonight. And we, you know, I can hear already from the Slidos that you're really thinking about your young people and the impact this is having on them. So really want to hold, I guess, that in mind, sort of as we sort of move on to the second half of the workshop tonight, to think about some of these key things that can hopefully support you and your young person with these things that are such a challenge at the moment. So I'll just hand over to Katie, who's going to talk us firstly through what we call an ABC chart. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Kelsey. So yeah, as Kelsey was saying, we really want to try and give you some really, really useful tools for how to sort of support your young person and understand what's going on for them and what might be driving some of this behavior. And as she said, I'm going to talk to you about an ABC chart, and this can be a really useful method for trying to identify what is driving those behaviors and what is going on for your young person. Going back to that sort of iceberg analogy that Kelsey was using earlier, this is about trying to sort of see beneath the surface and see what is going on below, underneath the surface with the iceberg. So an ABC chart looks at what is trying to get you to record what happens before a behavior and what happens afterwards. So it's called the antecedent. I think that's how you pronounce it. So the antecedent before what happens with the behavior. So what might be triggering that behavior to happen? And then what's the consequence? What does the child get out of that behavior? How are you responding to it? And as you fill these in, you can really start to often see a really distinct pattern of behavior. So you can often see what sort of times these are occurring, what particular events are causing the behavior to occur. And that can really help draw out sort of what the function of that behavior is, like we were talking about before. And so it's really trying to figure out what is the message that your child is trying to send here by doing that. And by writing it down, it can really help sort of get a bit of distance between what is happening in that sort of quite emotive event that challenging behavior can often be. I sometimes like to think of it as a pair of glasses, that when you don't wear your glasses, you're sort of caught up in the emotions of the situation. It's really difficult to sort of get in and pull apart what is happening and how we all interacting with each other that's sort of contributing to the situation. Whereas the ABC chart, if you can sort of write down what is happening, it can be sort of the glasses being put on and can make things feel a lot clearer. And that's sort of, it's a much easier job for us as professionals sort of coming in from the outside, that we're not involved in sort of the emotions of the situation. And so trying to give you the ABC charts is trying to help you get that emotional distance so that you can really think about what are the themes and what are the challenges that are going on for us. And help you look at it in a different way and approach it in a sort of much more calmer, much more low pressure environment that's much easier for you and your child, your young person, to talk about and try to come up with some solutions. And so next we're going to talk a little bit more about the brain and why some of this challenging behavior might be happening, what might be driving some of the behavior. Thank you, Kelsey. So we're going to talk a bit about the brain house analogy. We're not going to talk about it in great detail because I think it's covered in a lot of other workshops that are available through the Psychology in Schools YouTube channel. But we did want to touch on it because one of the things that's really big about growing into adults, there's a huge task in supporting the development of your children. That's a really big job for you as parents, to help them grow into well-regulated adults who can meet all of those really important milestones that you hope that they can meet, like getting a job, going to college, doing their GCSEs, possibly having relationships. There's sort of all these really big things that there's a lot of pressure on parents to sort of support children to develop the skills they need. And in order for them to do that, we need to develop these sorts of big planning skills that occur. So we like to think of a brain as having two floors, one of which is your downstairs floor, and that's what every person is born with, and it's pretty well developed. It's sort of that emotional, really instinctive brain that sort of some people think of as the caveman brain, and that's sort of that downstairs portion. Think of it as the downstairs of a house. And if you go up the stairs, then there is the upstairs of the house looks more at that sort of bigger developing skills. So look, those are skills that you need, like planning and organizing, problem solving, flexibility of thinking. And that's something that really develops sort of from birth up until around your mid-20s, that it takes a really long time for these skills to develop. And it's really important that you as parents can sort of support your child in developing those skills in the best way that they can. However, when we get very emotional or become quite stressed, there can often be a disconnect between that upstairs and that downstairs, and the staircase between those two floors can disappear, and we call it sort of flipping the lids, where they're actually the communication between the neural networks of your downstairs brain and your upstairs brain actually stop happening, and it can send you as it's your child and yourselves into a sort of fight, flight, freeze response. And so at those points, your child, they can't hear you, they can't make sense of what you're saying. And it's a really, really scary time for them often. And because at these times, your brain is designed to take action and keep you safe, even if that doesn't necessarily make sense in the modern situation that you're in. But your brain is responding to those sorts of old environmental triggers that would have happened back in the day where you did need to flee from something that was threatening to you. And so something that's really, really important is to try and get your young person regulated as quickly as possible to sort of get that brain flipped back down to that connection between their sort of more instinctual brain, emotional brain, and that sort of the brain that's more able to manage themselves and manage their emotions is really, really important, so that they and you can start to feel a bit more in control of themselves and their emotions, and they can start to calm down and know that they aren't under threat anymore, but they might feel safe because they're anxious or worried about a particular situation, but they aren't under a real threat. And so sort of what we really want you to take from that is how to manage your child sort of flipping their lid and being aware of that we also flip our own lids, because we all go under stress and things like that. And so it's really important to know how to manage yourself and manage your child so that you can all sort of work together to combat really challenging situations. And so it's really important to sort of find strategies around developing those skills that are involved in the upstairs brain, like planning, organizing, flexibility, and recognizing that when your child is in an emotionally safe place, that it's easier to take in what you're saying and work on these problems and build those skills to really help yourselves as a family.
And yeah, thanks for that, Katie. And I guess the thing, no, it is helpful. And I think what I would sort of add to that is sort of the quickest way, the most effective way we know to sort of get that lid back online is something that I've talked about already, that sort of connection over correction, before correction. So I guess that we know that the quickest way to get the lid back on, both for ourselves and our young people, and as parents and carers, we can do this for our young people, is to connect with them first, to help them feel sort of heard and understood. And of course, this is one of the most difficult things to do when in that moment when that behaviour is showing up. But really what we can do as parents is recognise when our own lid is flipped. As Katie said, it can cause that emotional contagion. It can cause our lids to flip and those around us to, their lids to flip. But actually what we know is a dysregulated adult cannot support and regulate a dysregulated child. So we can do that by firstly thinking about our own lids and how can we get our own lids back on and try and step back from that situation. And then help prioritizing connection over correction, really then to help our young person's lid get back online. And of course, as Katie said, this is hard and it takes practice and it takes doing something differently. But I guess that's a really key message that we'd like you to take away from today. And as Katie said, we talk about this a lot in our other parent workshops. So if you follow us on Eventbrite or look at us on YouTube, you'll see us talking about this in our other workshops, particularly the big feelings one.
So next I wanted to talk about a couple of the skills that are sort of part of that upstairs brain. And they're called the executive functioning skills. I don't know if anyone's heard about it before, but they are a really big part of daily life, especially as an adult. And they have having difficulties with them have a really big impact on sort of things that you're able to do. So executive functions are basically the brain's management skills. They're helping your ability to complete daily tasks and achieve your sort of lifelong goals. All children develop these at different speeds. And for those of you who might have a young person who is neurodiverse in some ways, these can often be things that they really, really struggle with, that So if you look at the different areas and see how they might impact your child's daily life, you have impulse control, so that's about thinking before acting. You've got emotional control, so trying to keep your feelings in check. I'm sure you can look at your children and think how hard that is, or look at yourselves and think that sometimes that's really challenging. Flexible thinking, so how able are you to adapt your behavior to your environment. Working memory, how well can you remember things and hold them in mind as you try to do something with the information that you've been given. That's really important in sort of following instructions. So how many times have you thought that you needed to do something, walked up the stairs, and then completely forgotten what you'd just been wanting to do? And so when you're giving instructions to your children, is that something that they find really challenging? Self-monitoring. So how aware are you of the impact of your behavior on other people, or the impact of your behavior on the task that you're trying to do? Planning and prioritizing. This is a really big one. It's an important skill to develop, but you can think of how often that comes up in everyday life. Even something as simple as getting ready in the morning. You have to plan what step you're going to do next, which task is most important to be able to get you out the door on time. Starting tasks, that's often a big one, especially around things like homework, or lots of you talked about those sorts of hygiene tasks that your children find really difficult. And that can often be around task initiation as well. And then also organization. So how can you organize yourself and all the things around you to keep everything together and keep everything moving and have all the things you need to do what you want? And think of your young person, keep them in your mind and think about the things that they find really challenging. I'm sure there's lots of examples that you can think of. And so when children are struggling with challenging behavior, we might be seeing that they're finding having a difficulty with executive functioning, and that might be a little slower to develop than other children their age. And so how can we help our young people develop skills in this area, rather than trying to get stuck in a cycle where they're trying to meet their needs through more challenging behavior? Because to become successful adults, we really need to develop skills in these areas. And it's really important for getting things done and reaching those milestones that are really important to them, that they want. So if you think about your young person and developing their skills, and for so many of you on this call, this is going to be a real big challenge for you at the moment, and something that's really affecting your lives right now. And so we want to try and sort of give you these skills and some strategies to think about how we're developing these executive functioning skills. And I think it's really, we want to sort of follow on from Dr. Stuart Ablon, who has a really, really great TED talk about this, and thinking about how if kids can do well if they can, rather than kids will do well if they want to, and really taking it as a deficit of skill rather than a deficit of will, if that makes sense. Lots of behavior management programs that are sort of relied on, particularly in schools, really focus on the idea that children are making a choice in whether they're going to behave or cooperate or not, rather than the fact that they might be in a situation where actually they don't have the skills to do certain things, or they might be finding something really challenging. And so based on this approach, it's really important to look at the skills that they might or might not have, and developing those, including the ones that we talked about on the previous slides. So supporting them in their planning and organization, supporting their working memory, supporting them in their ability to sort of monitor themselves, and how can we make that easier for them in day-to-day life? Because we know for all young people that some of these skills they're really building at this time really include sort of the ability to problem solve, the ability to tolerate frustration, and the ability to adapt to the world around them. If you think of a 2-year-old and a 13-year-old, they're very, very different skill sets that you expect, but we even if our children are sort of struggling with particular skills, we still keep the same expectations for any other 10-year-old, even if our child might be having more difficulty than the child next to them. And so we really want to move away from sort of feelings of blame or feelings of shame in either yourself or your child, that they can't do things that the children in the classroom next to them might find really easy, and instead recognizing things that actually are a really big deal for them and are actually massive achievements for them. So for example, sitting down in a maths lesson for 5 minutes, you might think, oh, every child can do that, why can't mine do it? Or instead, actually, that might be a really big achievement for them if they struggle to sit still for long periods of time, or they find maths really, really challenging. And so really sort of recognizing that and sort of rewarding them for that, I think is really, really important. And trying to give yourself permission as a parent to recognize the things that previously you would have thought they should be able to do, but actually that creates a lot sort of a sense of positivity towards them and a positivity within them if they feel themselves being recognized and rewarded for things that they're trying really hard at. Then that can be really, really important and can really help in sort of building up their self-esteem and their confidence, which is something you will discuss in sort of earlier Slidos about something that that they often seem to be struggling internally with when they're presenting with some more of their challenging behaviours.
Absolutely, and I think just sort of added to that, using the ABC chart to sort of monitor the positive behaviours as well, because as we sort of touched on that slide, often it's those ones that aren't reinforced. Child's sort of peacefully getting on with something, we'll leave them to it. We think, oh, we don't want to sort of disturb them. So I guess it's useful to sort of note down the times when they are doing those things and recognizing, as Katie said, those things that can seem so small, but actually for that young person, it's actually a huge thing that they've been able to do that, and sort of really paying attention and rewarding that, as we've said. So it's a really sort of useful thing to think about. And just to say, you'll get this TED Talk if you want to hear a little bit more from Dr. Stuart Ablon about this. I think it's a really important message that I think all of us, either working with children or have young children, can sort of focus on, really.
I think it's really important as well to follow on from that, of recognizing what your child responds to, that there's actually some children who feel a lot of pressure when they're being praised for certain things, if they're being praised in a very direct way. So actually sometimes it's finding about what works for your child, what makes your child feel sort of recognized and appreciated and rewarded for the things that they're doing. That it doesn't have to be that you're commenting really directly on all of the positive things they're doing, but it might be sort of giving them a little extra time on the thing that they really like when they're doing something positive, rather than them being a consequence of a negative behavior just because it's sort of difficult to manage the challenging behavior that they're presenting with.
Absolutely.
So I think the next thing we wanted to ask is sort of, what are the things that you find yourself doing as parents? Do you find yourself assuming that your expectations are understood by your child? Do you find yourself calling things out from a distance in the house? So you're in the kitchen and they're up in their bedroom, and that's when you're calling out your instructions from? Do you find yourself trying to transition without giving them any warning? Or giving a series of instructions that might be actually quite hard to follow when you think about it? And I think this is a really common thing. I think it's something that happens to everyone, especially in sort of busy family houses, when you're trying to get lots of things done, when sort of you've realized all of a sudden that you're really, really late, and oh no, you need to get off your Xbox, and where's your bag, and where's your coat, and you need to make sure you lock the door, and what time is it, and all of that sort of thing. And that sort of you're in a lot of stress there at the moment of trying to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do. But it's also really important to recognize that that might actually flag up some of those difficulties that your child is really struggling with, and make them sort of really noticeable if they're really struggling to sort of understand process all the instructions that they've been given, or if they do find it difficult to transition out of activities that they really enjoy. And it sounds like, looking at the Slido, it sounds like that's something that everyone can really relate to there, that we all find ourselves doing it. I find myself doing it with my partner or my family and things like that. It's not just sort of with parents to children, although that's something that it is more often when it happens. But it's really noticeable that in the chaos of family life, it's important to remember that we do assume sometimes that they've developed these skills when we might not. So we end up falling into traps really easily. So we talked a lot earlier about sort of negative attention, and when you're busy doing something and your child comes looking for some attention or someone to listen to them, and that if you're busy either helping out someone else or doing a task that's needed just to sort of run the family, but when they don't get that attention, they might present with some challenging behavior, and then they're getting some sort of attention. It might be negative, which might not be what they were looking for in the first place, but they're still seeking out that attention. As Kelsey said earlier, children really know how to get your attention. They know how to push those buttons to get the most effective way of getting what they need. They might have delayed consequences. How many times have you said, oh, next time, or next time this is going to happen, or if you do this again, then you won't get to play on your Xbox again, when actually they know that might not you might not necessarily be able to follow through with that, and so that doesn't stop that behavior from stopping. There's also sort of disproportionate consequences after a really, really long, stressful day. Then sometimes the tiniest thing can really set you off, and you sort of end up throwing the rule book out the window of different sort of consequences that you give your child that might not always necessarily match up, or even doing it for them. Sometimes it's a lot easier just to tidy up the game for them, or to sort of unload the dishwasher or lay the table or something like that, when actually it's really important to try and provide opportunities for them to develop these skills and be given that task to do, even though it feels easier just to sort of do it for them because it makes family life run a little bit smoother. And so I think it's really important to talk about scaffolding your children towards success. And there's this really nice book that we recommend by Noelle Janice Norton. And it gives a really good look and a lot of suggestions towards how to scaffold your children towards success, and really sort of help them help you almost. I think it's really important to think about, because a lot of this, although it might be more difficult in the short term, actually will hopefully help make daily life easier and stop so much attention and energy going towards these difficult behaviors. So we talk about sort of focusing on planning so that things go right rather than reacting when things go wrong. So trying to be really proactive and using those ABC charts of thinking about what are the situations that are really difficult for our family, and how can we plan our lives so that it makes them slightly less difficult, but still being able to do the things that we want to do. Having clear rules and expectations. That how often do we think about that we might feel like we're telling them our rules and expectations all the time, but how much do we sort of sit down and really sort of clearly lay out and agree all together, collaborate with your children of what are the rules and expectations of our family? What do they expect from you, and what do you expect from them in a really reasonable way? Giving consistent consequences, and actually having some sort of involvement of your children. What do they think a sort of consistent and fair consequence for their behavior is? Because a lot of the time they also know that behavior is not sort of acceptable or like a positive thing to do. So what do they think is an appropriate response for you to give them in response to that behavior? Also preparing the environment to make it easier for your kids to do the right thing. That we talked before about those difficulties with executive functioning, sort of planning and organizing. How can you make life easier for your children, for example, in that morning routine, to help them get ready for school? Is it that their clothes, the wardrobe where their clothes are, have sort of got labels on them so they can see where they need to find their shirt, where they need to find their trousers, where they need to find their shoes? Because it's really amazing what can happen when the pressure is taken off your children to sort of use some of those skills that they're still developing, that they can use to put towards really fun and exciting things that you can all do together as a family. Also creating routines that can help really with sort of difficulties around transitions and bedtimes, which, as people have said before in the Slidos, can be a really challenging time for lots of children. And so we've got webinars also on sleep, which talk about the importance of consistent routines and good sleep hygiene, which can sort of help make those much easier times of day. Also planning your day realistically and being okay if something goes wrong. You're not going to get it right all the time. I know I definitely don't get it right all the time, but being able to be sort of compassionate towards yourself, and not holding guilt that something has gone wrong, and being able to move forward onto a clean slate, so that it's not sort of that sort of challenging time or an argument or something like that that sort of holding you and your family back and sort of really helping you build those connections, and really building those connections through quality time. Even something 5 minutes, it doesn't necessarily need to be an active role on your part, but taking a real sort of genuine, non-judgmental interest in what your child is doing, sort of throughout the week, can be really, really important, help build that connection that we've talked about, that sort of connection, not correction, that Kelsey was talking about before.
I just want to apologize. I know we're
Yeah,
slightly
sorry.
running. No, hopefully it's all useful stuff. So hopefully you can just bear with us for another sort of 10 minutes. We really appreciate you sort of still hanging in there and listening and paying attention. So hopefully this is feeling helpful.
So yeah, we'll try and sort of move through these a little bit quickly. I hope that what we've been saying has been really helpful. That this is something that might be really useful to share with school if you feel that it's executive functioning that some of your young people are struggling with. And the Pathway to Success website have some really great resources that can be shared with school, and school can use as ways to sort of developing those executive functioning skills in your young people, and sort of making school a much more positive experience for them. There you go. And then just quickly, it's really important to sort of talk about the basics and really replenishing your child's fuel tank. That you can't sort of you can't drive on an empty engine. That sort of increasing rewards, increasing that positive time with your child, those opportunities for success, like we've talked about before. Building reachable goals in collaboration with your children. So they might have some really good ideas of what sort of things they want to do and what you can support them with, and supporting those to be manageable so that they can feel a real sense of accomplishment when they've completed those. Having more frequent breaks throughout learning tasks to really help them replenish that energy and replenish those skills, so they're not just constantly feeling like they're struggling with something or finding something challenging. Through keeping their energy up physically, not just mentally, with sort of really good food and sleep and exercise to really sort of keep them energized and engaged in sort of life and give them the feel that they need to move through everything. And there's a bit on here, there's a previous workshop talking about strength-based parenting that we really recommend listening to and should be available to you. And also encouraging positive self-statements. And the best way to do that is by modeling them yourself and having compassionate self-talk towards yourself when something goes wrong. That if they can see that that's something that you're doing. So for example, if you're saying, oh, I had a really, really challenging day today, but I really managed to push through it, and now we're having a lovely time together, and I really appreciate spending time with all of you, can really be a sort of positive thing and build that connection, because your children are, all of them, I'm sure, are really amazing. And it's really important to recognize and remind them of that and build that connection between you all. There you go. And then do you want to
I think in the interest of time, we'll probably go to the next slide, but
yeah, no,
definitely
I think that
something to think about as parents, thinking about your young person's sort of talents and things.
And so really what we've been talking about through much of the slide is building that connection with your child and the importance of your relationship with your child. As we said, that connection, not correction, can really bring that lid down when their lid has flipped on that house, and giving them opportunities to develop those skills and problem solving and frustration tolerance. So being proactive with predictable problems, choosing the right time to talk about it, that's really, really critical. Sort of, you might want to have the discussion immediately about why the thing that they've done is really not acceptable, but sometimes it can be really important, as you said, to give them that space, give them some time to calm down, and then you can both come together and sort of have a really, really productive and effective discussion about that.
We talk about striking while the iron is cold, not when the iron's hot. That idea of kind of when, yeah, things are really sort of heated, things are really difficult, it's not a good time for anyone to sort of talk and reflect in that space. So waiting for things to calm down, waiting for the iron to cool down, and strike when the iron is cold might be a helpful analogy to hold in mind there.
And also the importance of sort of being, during that time, being really sort of curious and empathetic and having a really calm approach can really help your child feel sort of emotionally safe and help them feel more comfortable opening up and talking about things that they might be finding a bit challenging at the moment. Also giving them opportunities to give you ideas about what they might like to change and what might make things easier for them, rather than sort of putting your own ideas on them, giving them the opportunity to have a bit of autonomy over what happens in your family life. And again, setting your child up for success by collaborating with them. I think that's something that we've talked a lot about through the strategies. Is I'm sure your children, especially the older ones, have a lot of really good ideas about what they think would work and what they think would be helpful for them. And then giving them lots of opportunities to sort of practice those skills and modeling those skills for them as well can be really, really important in sort of building and developing those skills in your child. I think we've talked a lot about all the things that parents need to be doing and what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. But I think it's really important to recognize that this is really challenging for you. This is a really, really difficult thing to try and sort of manage and comprehend. It can often be emotionally exhausting, as you've all sort of talked about in the Slido. That was a real theme that came across, that a lot of you have felt very, very tired, and things like that. And it is a really hard thing to do. And it often means that your own needs aren't met, that there's sort of a cycle of your child's needs aren't met and your needs aren't met, and it all can be sort of all go around in a loop, and it's a lose-lose situation and no one feels happy. So I think it's really important to sometimes be a little bit selfish for yourself. You can't pour, as you said, you need to fill your own bucket. You can't pour from an empty cup, you can't pour from an empty bucket. And so it's really important to put yourself in a situation where you are supported and feel like your own needs are being met in order to meet the needs of your child.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to that idea of a dysregulated adult can't support or regulate a dysregulated child. So what do you need to get your lid back on? And I guess that will look different for different people. You know, who's in your support network? What hobbies or things or self-care activities do you find helpful? Is it getting out for a quick walk? Is it having, you know, just 5 minutes to yourself? Is it watching a program you enjoy or having a bath? You know, just doing those things for yourself that you need to really replenish your own fuel tank, are going to be so important here. But we know this is tough, but I guess it's just a reminder that this is so key. This is hugely important, and something that, you know, we really encourage all of the parents that we work with and support to think about when, you know, challenging behaviour is having such an impact on their young people and them. And it really models to our children the way that we can look after ourselves. They learn often by watching us and learning from us. So if we can sort of model, you know, the skills that we want our children to develop, that's going to be really helpful to them as well. So we've just got some final resources now, and then we'll just finish off with some final Slidos. So thank you all so much for bearing with us. I'm realizing we're a few minutes over. So hopefully today was just a useful intro to sort of thinking about challenging behaviour, what underlies it, and then specific things that you guys can start to think more about. But these are just some resources to help you think about that a bit more. So we've got some sort of guides and things. So you'll get the link to these in the slides. The Just One Norfolk is a free online course. I think there's about 6 videos involved in that, and it's brilliant. You don't have to sign up or anything. It's freely accessible. That talks much more about sort of these behaviours and strategies that you can use, with a particular focus on what's called positive behaviour strategies. There's also some great resources on the ADHD Foundation website that you can see there. Your child doesn't have to have that as a diagnosis to access these resources. They can be helpful for lots of us. And there's also a toolbox there from Dr. Tina Ray for schools, which again is a really nice resource that can be shared. So thinking about more help. So Home Start, for those families joining us tonight from Suffolk. So we're a Suffolk-based team. So these are sort of mainly Suffolk-based ones. But you can make a self-referral to Home Start. So again, they offer a range of different support in the family home. You've got the Parenting Hub as well, so information there around different sort of courses and things that they sort of run and do. You've got the Suffolk SEND team number on there and their resources with the link. And also thinking about school nurses as well. So some of you heard about us through school nurses, so you may be familiar with this, but again, you can sort of contact them on the number or their email address there. And also just Suffolk family carers. So they'll provide advice and guidance as well as emotional support for parents as well. Sometimes we all need that, you know, from someone outside of the family, as Katie said, who's maybe sort of not emotionally invested and involved in that situation. Again, to build up our own resource bucket as parents and carers. So there's information there about how you can access that service as well. So just 2 final Slidos, and then I promise we'll let you go. Thanks again for bearing with us. So it'd be useful just to hear from you whether you found this session helpful. This usually comes up as a multiple choice. I'm not sure it looks like one. So if you could just say if you agree or disagree, that would be really helpful. Lots of yeses and a thumbs up as well, which is lovely to see. Please be honest though. Yes. Yes, it's lovely. So many of you have remained on the call tonight as well. So that's brilliant. It's great to see these comments. As we said, we keep these, we go back to them. It's really helpful for us as we're sort of continuing to develop and run these workshops. So all very positive. That's brilliant. As we said, you know, this is just a starting point. It's maybe, you know, just an intro. Yeah, please do rewatch it. I think that's the beauty of doing these sort of things recorded. You'll get the slides, you'll get the recording, and someone's saying it's great to hear we're not alone. And I think that's why these Slidos are so important, because it really illustrates that. You guys have said so many things that we wouldn't have been able to give without your support. So thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so the final Slido is just 2 things that you'll take away from today's session. So what 2 key things out of everything we've talked about, I know we've talked about a great deal of things, will you hold on to? And this is really helpful again for us to know, so we don't take that out when we update the recordings, the slides. But also we know if you write things down, it helps you to remember things. So anything that you'll take away from today. So people talking about that connection over correction. It's a big one. It's a nice one to hold in your head. ABC, the iceberg analogy, sort of filling up your own bucket and remembering you're not alone. The idea of sort of positive rewards for those more sort of positive behaviours. People saying they love the brain house and striking while the iron is cold. Lots of people saying very different things. So a dysregulated adult can't support a dysregulated child. So sort of thinking about your own bucket, getting your own lids back on. Other people saying that knowing they're not alone. Thinking about different ways to approach the challenging behaviour and rethinking those consequences. So you'll get the copy of the ABC chart in the slide. So it really kind of breaks down and you can start to think about this, start to think about some of those patterns and use, you know, some of those other ideas we've touched on. But please do use the resources as well. So we'll leave this Slido on. This is our final slide. But just the final thing that I just want to say is, you know, thank you all so much for taking the time to come tonight. This is such, I think parenting is the hardest job in the world, but especially when you're managing the things that you all are. So really appreciate you taking the time. You know, it's difficult to do that in any of our lives. And yeah, and I'm glad to hear it's been helpful for those of you that have joined us on Slido. So yeah, really good luck with continuing those things and just draw on the resources that we've shared if you want to. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.